and welcome back to Personal Code of Conduct. My name is Dio, and today we'll be starting the Xiangxia story. I said I was going to say it's not really Xiangxia, obviously. It's based on the Yoruba mythos. I don't know. Maybe for now the title is the path of issue. I know it's like very generic because it's like trying to show that existence, trying to find life. It might be generic and be like people might interpret it as the part of the devil or the part of evil or the part of trickery or the part of, but issue is about human existence, and this story is about a character that is trying to find her way in the world, try to find a reason why she's conscious. So that's why it's a part of issue. Then maybe book one, this book is going to be centered around her discovering Orumila. So let us begin our story. In a village, it's a village, an abule, a regular small abule, where everybody grew cassava, everybody grew corn, everybody went to the market on Mondays, everybody did everybody went to the market on Sunday, everybody did as expected. Children were born, homes were built, people were married, and people died. There was peace in the land, and there was Jamiloju. Jamiloju was, a surprise. She had parents who were not expecting any children, and it was very strange that they had children. In the village where everybody seemed to venerate the god Ogidon, she was from a household. A father who venerated Ogun and a mother who venerated Oya, which is weird. She always wondered why her surname was weird and different. It wasn't that particular. Everybody knew that, people are called Ogun something or Oya something, but nobody expected someone from a village to be called Ogun something. It turns out her parents had changed their names. There had been a war. There had been a great war. All the men went to fight, and some of the stronger women. Then the rest stayed to defend the children. When the parent people came back, they spoke about giant armies. They spoke about orishas. They spoke about orishas, or they spoke about orishas who had descended from the skies, calling down rain, calling down lightning, calling down fire, pulling metal from the earth and making everything powerful. But then they went back to their farming. But two young people who had left the village came back not bearing Ogunto, not bearing Akin, not bearing Ayon. Like everybody in the village. They were not, even the other names were rare. Most people were Ogido something. Because, they venerated the farming. It was about getting the crops ready for others to grow, others to eat, and for life to continue. Her father was named Ogunyemi. He didn't have a surname. I don't think they all had surnames. He was an orphan. So it wasn't like everybody else who was Ogunya something, or Akin something, or Ayon something, or Ade something. They had very few Ades. Nobody could actually claim to be royalty in their small village. But he didn't have a surname. He used to be just, Ogidan something. No clan, no home. Now it was Ogunyemi, Ogunlowo. And her mother became Oyabumi, Ogunlowo. Because, while she did come back with an Oya surname as well, she married her husband almost immediately. It was a small ceremony. There were no expectations of wedding. There were no expectations of weddings. There was no igbeyawo to be had. There was no bride price given because they were both orphans who had become distinguished in the war, and for some reason they had caught the eye of the many devotees of the many gods. The gods who did not provide food, obviously. And Oguyemi became, not that he had always crowned up, but something changed after the war. He became the village hunter. The men went to hunt, but none were as prolific as Oguyemi. And Oyabumi was always there to chart the way, always there to understand the path, always there to accept the gifts of Oya. But people were surprised when Jamiloju came along because the woman who had accepted the name Oya oftentimes had accepted the face of her patron goddess, the fated the fate of the mother of nine dead children. People just did not expect a devotee of Oya to have children. But they did. They had one child and they had no more. While others in the village had six, five strong children. And most of the women stopped giving birth after six or seven, after six, but there were some with nine children. Dramiloji was the only one her parents had. But she wasn't strong or special being born from the womb of an Oya devotee. She was just a child, a regular child at the village. She would wait with her mother as her mother talked about, well, the way the river is flowing, how the water is working, whether the storms would come, and general things that Oya devotees seem to know. Well, she often had doubts, but at least she knew more than most in the village. Then her father would come home with antelope or fresh game, so there was always meat to be had. So in this small town, so one day, Jamluju, turning 11, decided, well, what happens to me next? The other girls turning 11, well, they turned 11 and talks were already in the way that for the time when they reached the 18 summers or 18 years, well, they would move. They would move to somebody else's house. They would get married. But for some reason, the talk never came. The talk about what to do next, the talk about what to structure never came. Her father Ogunyemi and her mother Oyabumi told her that they needed to go on a journey. They needed to go on a journey on her 11th birthday. And Eji. So instead of going to the markets like everybody else in the village, they had gone prior to the week before and had sold so many things. Ah, they had sold so many things, and I told her, we won't be having talks with anybody. Jamiloju, Oya Jamiloju, come with me. We are going on a journey outside the village. Jamiloju had never been outside the village, but apparently her parents had. Well, everybody who had been to the war had. So her and her parents set out. They crossed the rivers, they crossed the streams, they crossed so many things. She saw so many places, so many people, so many cultures, so many villages like hers, and even towns that are bigger than her village. Until one day, they landed in a bigger ilu that she had ever seen in her life, the biggest town that she had ever seen in her life. And the parents walked into the city gates, screamed high up and said, I am Ogunyemi, a recent acolyte of the cult of Ogun, a devotee of Ogun, a follower of Ogun, a lover of the god of fire. And this is my wife, Oyabumi. She is a lover of the winds, a lover of the river, a lover of power. And we have brought our daughter to speak to Ifa. Jamiloji was shocked and weird because why couldn't they just speak to the Babalawo in their village? Every village had a Babalawo, someone who would tell them what is going to happen, what to do next, how to have order, how to have structure, what are the orders that come from above, what is the language of the government. Because Babalawos just seem to know the will of the Joba, the will of the government. Because not just did they talk about divine and tell who was to marry who or who what was the best thing or just they just seem to know everything, and instantly the babalawo will come and say orders had come from the capital. They just used the word capital. Jamilojo had never ever been to Ife. She had never heard anything about Ife, but they used to refer it as the capital. And this was what people were meant to do. So she wondered, why was she being brought to see the Ifa in this big town? Why couldn't they just see the Ifa in her town? But she kept quiet because children keep quiet when adults are talking, unless adults are talking to them. The mother, Jamlen Ogunyemi and Oyabumi, stayed in the house of the Ifa when they arrived there. The Babalawo said he would come to meet them within 3 days he'd come to meet them within 3 days, and he needed to rest well. He had other important matters to attend to. So Jamilady looked at her mother and asked, well, it can't be that dangerous if she was to ask. Then her mother said, I'm sure you're wondering, and asked, why didn't we just go and meet Baba Alawo in our town? Why didn't you just go and meet Baba Rolake? Rolake was, well, Jamiladu's only friend, and her father was the Babalawo of the village. And he said, well, you have met Babalawo. You have met Baba Rolake. You've met, well, Oguyemi called him Ifabumi, which is weird. Her mother was also a Bumi, but she was a Bumi given by Oya. A blessing from Oya, not from Ifa. And she said, well, you have been spoken to him. And he said, when you reach 11, we should bring you to a greater priest than he, one who has seen deeper into the will of Oromila, one who knows more of the ways of Oromila and can see more into the path of Ela and Ifa. So we came here. He has possibly already sent it to us. Further, when Ogunyemi saw that when they immediately arrived at the Balawo place, he had handed his sheets. He could not read what was there. Apparently, he had the words that only the owls could understand. Maybe he could read it. He had an idea maybe of what was there, but he didn't attempt to read it for fear he'd be blind. So he sent the script in hand and gave it to the guards, who in turn gave it to Babalawo, who then asked them to stay in his house for 3 days when he had time to see them. So, the owl, 3 days later, when they sat down, they were always meal. For some reason, the Babalawo had the biggest house she had ever seen, which was strange. Owls generally were modest, but well, when she looked at the other houses in that district, she realized, well, he is modest for where he lives. The roofs were low, and there were posts gathered with men on horses and women dancing, pillars holding up the low roof that made the air and soil, the red soil, so cool in the home. The Babalawo, on the third day, the Babalawo asked them to come into the center of the courtyard. Come to the courtyard. It was an open trench. Would I call it a trench? But they had a tree growing out of it, and it was separate. It was in the center of the compound. They had gone in, and he asked them to sit outside. He went into the groove of the massive tree in the center of his compound, and later he called them into the groove. So there sat Ogunyemi, Oyabumi, and their daughter Oyajamiloju, waiting for the divination. So the Ifa priest came out and held a hand. He greeted Oyabumi and Ogufemi and said, well, I can see why you became acolytes, or you became people who followers of the god of iron and the god of storm. Both of you, though late, have some form of Asher within you. It was never long enough or strong enough, but I think the word definitely got it to come out of you. And now you have a daughter that has the words of Asher on her lips, a daughter that is capable of sound, a daughter that can speak, I can walk the path of the eternal Isheshe, a daughter that has the ability to speak with her Ori directly to grow the path of Iwa. So yes, that is why you were asked to come here because I could sense it directly from here. It's not the most powerful I've ever seen, but it's there. She has the ability to walk the Sheshe and she has the mouth of Ashe. So she sat down. Jamiloju had all these pressing questions. She wanted to know what Ashe was, what Isheshe was, but her parents just seemed to be happy and congratulating. But at the same time, they were happy but scared. They had left their village once and had come back powerful in quotes. They had come back stronger. But now they were saying that their only child had to leave to walk the path of the Orisha, had to leave to start something. Then the Ifa said, well, in a month's time, I will go towards Orumila, towards the cult of Orumila, the structure of Orumila, the priest home of Orumila. Acolytes of Oya, acolytes of Ogun, and everyone who follows the other gods are going to be there. Let's wonder who is going to choose her. But I have a feeling now, well, see, she's already Oya Jamiloju, and she's the daughter of Ogunyemi. She'll probably definitely fall within the path of the gods who chose you. So you don't need to worry. You were chosen, even though your journey started late, even though your journeys ended before they started. She has an opportunity to go further than you. So when the full moon comes this month, it's just the start of the moon, we will depart this town. We will depart Ishara and we'll be on our way to the gathering of the acolytes. They're coming to pick out new disciples. And not to worry, as I said, well, we know where she's going to, hopefully. Jamila spent the entire month staying with her parents because it finally dawned on her that she would never, no, she not necessarily never, but she would not see them again for a long time because they had passed many towns and it had taken them 2 months to get to the city to meet his Babalawo. And the Babalawo seemed to say they were going somewhere even much farther. How on earth was she going to be able to survive that? How on earth? And if they leave by the full moon and don't expect to get there for the next 3 months, how on earth was she going to survive? How was she going to go back home? But her mother held her close and said, we, and told her that they were proud. They were proud that she would continue a path that they had stopped. She never really understood what this path was. And neither did her parents, because their journey had ended. Their bodies had become too old before they could start. And they were married. And their bodies had become too old and their talents not enough before they could start. A month came after Jamilo's strength, and she said goodbye to her parents. They both left at the same time, while her parents walking back in the direction of the village. Well, maybe they were a bit happy, back to being the only two ones, because they had accepted that. Ogun had accepted that he had married a devotee of Oya. He wasn't expecting children anyway, as much as he loved his daughter. So they went their way back home. In opposite directions they went. Jamiloji followed the far priest to go across the mountains. Well, to go across the hills. Very soft, sedimentary red sand hills, covered in vegetation, through the forest to the well-meeting path. They must have walked for months until They must have walked for months at least. She saw at least the sun go down up to 30 times. She saw the sun go down up to 60 times. Because she wasn't really sure, 30 or 60. As a small child, she was allowed to sleep anytime she wanted, and she went with the other children. She wasn't the only one that went to the Ifa. There were children all around her age, boys and girls, and they often rested a lot. That's why it took them so long to reach the place because they didn't have strong bodies needed to make that long commute. They arrived. They arrived at a grove, a sacred grove, in the city of Oshogbo, in the Ilu Oshogbo. They landed there, and the city gates were open. Once they got into the city, well, it was. She thought the township that she had gone to further away from her bully was bigger she had ever seen. She was even more, what's the word? Amazed by the sight she saw in Oshobo. So then she was taken towards the forest. She was taken towards the forest and and her and the other children were made to sit down on the floor and were given black robes. Black robes, and they all had their head shaved. The black robes and they all had their head shaved. Her mother had already told her about this, that well, her fluffy hair would have to go. There'd be no wool, there'd be no didi. She would start again depending on the path of who she chose. She might end up becoming a dada. She might end up having intricate braids in her hair, depending on whose acolyte she became. But she hoped she'd become an Oya acolyte with long, beautifully braided hair in single strands. But then she saw, and all the children sat down with their shaved heads and the white chalks put on their scalp by the various Ifa priests that had brought them from many different towns. They spent a week getting to know each other. Well, she stayed with the children who came with her group. They spent a week getting to know each other, trying to find out what was up, who was that, where they from. And Jamiloju met people who were from small villages like her, or were from big towns that she had never heard of before. She had made particular friends with a young boy who apparently only ever talked about Shango, who only ever talked about lightning and powers and things. Because many of the children, especially the children from big town, talked about the ability to call upon fire. They talked about the ability. She knew her parents had different surnames, but she had never, seen her father. Well, maybe she had never seen her mother call upon the rains like some of the girls who were named Oya like her mother. She had never seen her father summon iron. But he was a hunter and a town blacksmith. And her mother was a resident rainmaker. And was a resident rainmaker. She would sit down and consult with with Iyanifa, the wife of the Babalawo, and together they'd map out a plan and tell the villagers that the rain would come in so and so time, and they needed to be prepared. But she had never seen them do any of the things these children's parents seem to be able to do, or the households they seem to be able to come from, calling out fire, calling out rain, doing all sorts of things. So Jamiloju was excited. She decided to wait. She decided, but she had already set her mind. Well, I'm probably going to end up with Oya. There are very few women who follow Ogun, and there are very few men who follow Oya. I'm probably going to end up with Ogun, with Oya, just like my mother said. So she stopped thinking about all these things. She stopped thinking about greater gods. Because while she knew about Edumare, everybody knew about Edumare. Her household only had two altars. An altar to Ogun and an altar to Oya. She understood nothing about the worship of all the other gods that were coming. Some boys and girls even came with drums and agogo and drums and bells and git and I wouldn't call it a guitar. Jesus, I'm thinking of the name, but it's and fuck and string instruments too, and all of them seem to have the surname Ayon, and they're expecting to be chosen for the people chosen to stay with the god of music, the god of drums, Ayon Galu. She had never heard of god, this god before. She knew some people were called Akin, but she never knew who played music. But they were often who played at the village bonfires and the groups. She had never heard anybody with the surname Mayo. It was strange. They seemed so dedicated to the idea. And apparently, Akin, as a sub branch of the people who follow Ayon, well, she found out something new. She was, but then she sat with the boy who kept on talking about how amazing Shango was, how there was fire, how his father had once summoned the lightning into their house and flashed the light to catch a thief who had stolen, who had attempted to rob the Bale's home. And everybody was just like, "Whoa, isn't lightning too much for a regular thief?" And he was like, "No, no, no. This thief had the this thief had the power of shadow. This thief was a follower of issue. This thief was a follower of issue. The father needed the lightning, and he went." I was like, then everybody kept on being skeptical. Ishu doesn't really have followers. Ishu doesn't have the time and patience to bless them with a share. He doesn't listen, and he has no time to give you the insight of his sheshi. He's busy shuttling between worlds. How would you have seen an Ishu worshipper? He most likely would have been, I don't know. Well, he most likely would have been something else. The children couldn't think of a other god, but he most likely, at least from what they knew, couldn't have been an Ishu worshipper. Jamilodi just watched. She didn't understand any of the things they were saying. Like, why couldn't anyone be an Ishu worshipper? What was wrong with Ishu? Like, that was strange. Aren't all the Orishas supposed to have time? Well, they're Orishas. They should have the ability to be in many places. Maybe not all places, but in many places at once. So the children talked among themselves, they laughed, they told stories about the cool things they had seen, and then they separated, and eventually people who had more to tell to each other stood up and told everyone stories. People who had seen more told more, and children were happy and safe because they were children and they were just here to get chosen. They're children who were known to have to connect their share with their ori, and everyone was excited. So a week of bonding, the children, Jamluju inclusive of course, all lined outside with their black wrappers going all around their waists because, well, they're children. Nobody had anything of going all around their waist, and with some of the young girls going all around their waist and new ilekes that their parents had gotten from various rivers. Some people had gold inlaid with their ilekes. Some people just had coral, and that was fine. So the Orishas came, and all the children tried to stay in the lines and the lanes provided as per they were arranged by their babalawos that had brought them along. And one by one, the children were picked. Some of them were and asked to swap their robes for a particular color. Those who went with the Batala were swapped their black robes for white. Those who went with Shango swapped their black robes for red. Those who went with Yemoja swapped their black robes for purple. But then, one by one, children were chosen. Until of the 300 children, there were just 5 who had not yet been chosen. They had not yet been chosen. And the Ifa asked them why. Because Jamiloju was among the five. And the Ifa asked them why. Why have you not been chosen? And the question was like, the children looked in shock. Like, how was I supposed to know? Like, why is the question posed to me and not the acolytes from. And I was like, well, then the other children, one who had already got chained down her purple robes and got spoken to the cult of Iemoja, and I was like, don't you feel the vibrations? Don't you feel the call? Don't you hear them? And said, no, we do not. And the children were asked to wait in the temple for 1 more week because there were still acolytes coming and they were expected to be late. And then came in an acolyte of then came in an acolyte of Olokun, which is strange. Olokun followers never come to a small to Shogo. That is too far inland to see them. And an acolyte of Ishu, which is strange. All the other priests, all the other followers, all the other members of different cults were shocked to see a follower of Ishu because they hardly ever in one place or one time, or they hardly ever do one thing. They just exist. They move place to place. They didn't have a base. They just moved and decided this was what they wanted. This was what they did. So the children, the Olokun, took the four children that waited. Very strange children. Very strange children. And the Olokun acolytes were strange. They all dressed strange. You never could tell, were they a man, were they women? Olokun people were strange. Nobody really knew what they were. And the children who she even took always had that weird look. They looked strange. Not strange as in evil. You just could not tell, were they men or were they women? They were people, and that was strange. When she saw the local people, she realized, oh, this do match. No wonder they're late. The Olokun is the god of the ocean. It takes a while to come from this far inland from a place with the oceans. But there she was standing, and she kept on looking, she kept on feeling. She felt eyes staring at her. She felt cold. She felt scared. But for some reason, she felt the need to laugh, which was strange. Then she saw this old, young, nobody really knows. He moved, he walked, he laughed. And he said, my name is Ishu Yamilenu, and you, you're no longer Oya Jamiloju, you're now Ishu Jamiloju. And I knew it's expected. You did have a very interesting name. It was surprising. My name is also surprising. Well, a different kind of surprise. Yeah. Jamiloju, I'm Yamilenu. And we are now followers of Ishu. And when he put off his cloak, she saw a much younger face than she thought. He seemed old and young at the same time, but she looked closely, she realized, he was young. He couldn't be any more older than 16. And she was like, are you my teacher? And he was like, well, yes and no. I feel I'm too young for a disciple. I feel I'm too young for a follower, but we're Ishu people. We do whatever it is we want. And I think, not really. I wouldn't call myself your teacher. That's a lie. But what am I? Well, you can call me teacher. But we are going to go and meet my teacher. And he'll probably be your teacher. You're 11, right? That's strange. So yes, our main character, Jamiloju, has started her journey towards the path of Ishashi. I feel this was terrible. This was definitely terrible. Fuck. Well, it has been a personal code of conduct. I did a horrible job with the world building, but the story starts this way. Welcome to the past of Ishu.